Welcome back to the Between Breaths podcast. Jacko here, your host on this Easter special. And it's a very special podcast because for the potentially, it might be for the very first time, but back by popular demand, far quicker than anyone would have anticipated, because she was so good on the podcast only just a few weeks ago, and we had so much unfinished business to discuss. And the response from you, the listeners, thank you, first of all, for the response. But having Jill Miller back on the podcast, author of Body by Breath, so many of you sent so many amazing messages from listening to the podcast and some of the clips that were shared on social media. We said at the time, oh man, this hour has just flown past. We need to get you back on as soon as possible. So massive thank you to Jill. We've made that happen. She's straight back on, and I'm just going to whet your appetite that she is going to explain a number of things. But there's one thing I can tell you for sure, because it blew my mind. She is going to tell you something about how the diaphragm contracts that I absolutely guarantee you did not know, and that it will change your perspective on, change the perspective on the contraction of the diaphragm, and or make sense some of the sensations that you're feeling with your diaphragm and how that weird muscle seems to get bigger when it contracts. So you've got that to look forward to, and a special thank you from me to Jill for being on the podcast, taking the time to speak to us again, and for sharing so openly her expertise, and something she's been doing for a very, very long time, and she shares it with such love, such passion, and you can tell that she just really loves teaching and coaching what she does. And there's an opportunity. I'm hoping to get there. I'm going to be down there for definitely one of the days in September. She's coming over to the UK. So for UK listeners, she's coming to London in September. The details she explains towards the end of the podcast. Before we jump in, I've got a couple of things for you coming up. With it being Easter, it's Easter Sunday, it's Saturday. I'm literally recording this intro yesterday as you're listening to this. If you're listening to it today, maybe hopefully your Easter Sunday there's other important stuff going on, so you're not actually listening to the podcast on the Sunday. Maybe it's Bank Holiday Monday and you've got a bit of time to spare, or maybe it's Tuesday and you're back to work and you're listening on the commute. Anyway, it's Easter, and I've got a special discount code Easter25. So Easter and then the numbers 25 gets you 25% off the three most popular or best-selling programs that I have on the website at probreathwork.com. Also available on my app, which is the Pro Breathwork app. So that's the Breathwork for Sports Performance, that's the Breathwork for Mobility and Movement, and the High Intensity Exercise and Sport program. So breath training to take your movement, if it's mobility, or to take your training, if it's sports performance or high intensity work, to another level. 25% off of those. So they're normally 99 quid, so it gets it for less than 75 quid to jump on board with those. That offer's going to end at the end of the week. So Easter 25 is the discount code for that. Check those out, and there'll be a link in the show notes to that specific page with the reminder of that discount code in case you couldn't remember Easter 25. And then also got the next Oxford Vented certification coming up. There's only 2 left this year. The one at the end of the year in October is here in beautiful Snowdonia, down in the retreat centre at Trigonos, and that's in October. So that places for that are actually starting to book up already. So and October will come around quick, won't it? But coming up really quick next month, 9th, 10th, 11th of May is the next certification, which is actually run as a retreat, as in you stay on with the accommodation, beautiful woodland retreat centre, ice bath, sauna, beautiful food, delicious food, and all of that retreat accommodation, food, facilities, it's all included in the price, as well as obviously the 3-day certification where I, as your master instructor and mentor, teach you, coach you, and take you through and guide you through the Oxford Vantage process in those 3 days, but and beyond, as you get to join my free mentoring group where all of the coaches, over 200 of them now, have access to the coaches community that we've been developing. So Zoom calls every month, and as well as a free coaches get together. We just had the last one a few weeks ago at the start of April here in Snowdonia, and we're planning for next year's already because the feedback from everyone of like getting the coaches together in person is just so powerful. And we do some CPD, some continued professional development as part of that, but it's also just a great chance to get together and connect. And then something that's coming in the pipeline that I'm working on by popular demand is a week by week training program. So how does breath training fit into other aspects of your training? So it's not going to be specific to say just running like I do a lot of. It's going to be for how could you integrate breath training, the protocols and techniques that I use, or the professional and international athletes that I work with. How can you integrate those into the different types of training that you may be taking on yourself? So whether you're doing high rocks or CrossFit, or whether you're doing running or ultras or whatever those things you're working towards, whatever the thing is that you're doing with your physical exercise, a week by week program that's likely at the moment looking to like it's going to be 10 weeks long. That is something that's coming up in the next month or so. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that. I'm very excited about what's been pulling together. I'm just putting the final tweaks to that literally as we speak. So that's everything that's coming up from me. Let's get into this podcast. Jill Miller back again for part 2 on the Between Breaths podcast, because she is such a legend and she's got so much knowledge waiting for you now. Here is Jill Miller on the Between Breaths podcast.
We enter this world taking our first breath, and sadly, we leave this place taking our last. And what I want to do with this podcast is to explore what happens between those breaths. I'm David Jackson, Jacko, and this is the Between Breaths podcast.
Okay, Jill, welcome back to the podcast. Yeah, the response was big, insane, let's say. Yeah. And we said at the end of the last one, and if they haven't listened to the first episode, make sure you go and check that out. Well, maybe you want to pause this and go and check it out, or you check it afterwards. But it felt like there was a lot of questions still left to be asked. So thank you for your time for jumping on for a part 2. I know that the listeners are going to be very intrigued.
Oh, I hope so. I hope I don't repeat myself.
No, because I'm going to ask some different questions.
Okay, good.
But so we're going to dive straight into it. There was one big area that I think that, from reading your book and seeing your work, that you bring lots of these different elements together, that the breath is at the center at. One thing that's sort of at the center of the body, like the diaphragm and the rib cage. And just want to start by setting the scene as to why, if somebody wants to improve their movement quality, their mobility, some of the restrictions that they've got in their body, why starting with breathing might be a useful place to start rather than with a hip articulation sort of mobility typical exercise. That makes sense?
Extensions. Yeah, like let's start with elbow extensions and knee extensions.
Yeah.
A whole body moving. Why start with the prime engine of your body, your respiration, your respiratory pattern? It is a dynamic stabilization, central axial engine for all movement. And because the diaphragm's movements have this ripple effect into all of your core musculature, you want to make sure that that ripple effect is dynamic, is elastic, is full of its possible motion. If there's restrictions in that, that's going to have a domino effect. We'll stop using ripple effect, a domino effect into the limbs, all the way out to the perimeter. So if I don't have good movement in my rib cage, or I don't have good expansion in the waist, the low back, the pelvic floor, I'm going to be translating stiffness to more stiffness to more stiffness. So we want to have this elastic play, and the elasticity is allowed via the fascial tissues that are the links between muscle layer to muscle layer to muscle layer, from core to periphery.
Yeah. I had a really interesting example of this that its N is one, but a new athlete that was a fighter, and you think that like the posture someone like fights in is like an MMA fighter, like there's a lot of closed protection, flexion sort of tone type of shoulder positions, the spine gets out. Um, on assessment of breathing, like mechanics, and he has been doing like yoga like once a week for a while, and has obviously had clearly worked on like good like breathing mechanics, and was very good at breathing. And then interestingly, his movement capacity, mobility, flexibility, whatever you want to describe it, but the way his joints, shoulder, spine, hips would articulate not just the range that he had, like it was like a knife through butter. It was just like
Mm.
I'd almost, it was like the most, I want to say most flexible, but it's not that, but just the movement was so beautiful
Graceful.
for graceful for such a brutal like sport. And I'm biased towards going, well, it's almost no surprise there's some sort of correlation there between like here's one of the best breathers I've worked with like from day one, and interestingly one of the best movers. I'm sure
Well,
you've
I
probably got
think,
something to say on that.
yeah, well, it, it, it makes a lot of sense to me because I think fighting is a lot like ballet. You know, you have to have this incredible ability to extend and recoil, to be able to reach
Mm,
out and then back away, and to rely on quick reflexes. You want to have maximum length tension
yeah,
capacity of your tissues. And of course, you know, your breath offers this additional power source for landing a punch or for thrust,
yeah,
right? For acceleration. So it doesn't, I'm not surprised at all because I work with a boxer, and his first of all, I can just feel in thinking about my
yeah.
friend, whose his name is also David, actually,
Oh,
just the buoyancy in his tissue, the warmth in his tissue, and it's easy compressibility, and then
yeah.
it's easy reperfusion. It's very, very healthy tissue.
Mm, yeah, yeah. No. So, I think we're talking primarily to people that are listening to this podcast um, are they're bought into like, okay, breathing can really affect lots of things within my body and how I feel, and movement being one of them. Um, before we go into like the detail of that, just zooming out to what are some of the mistakes or restrictions or compensations that you see typically around people's breathing that they may not be aware is affecting that stiffness that you say is like is emanating out from that center. What are some of those things that people can maybe look out for, or be aware of, or sort of check in on themselves?
Oh, I'm trying to remember what I did or didn't say in the first podcast, but I went over the three zones of respiration.
Yeah,
You, right? So when somebody is living more in a primarily level zone three, accessory muscles of respiration as their frequent default, meaning
yeah,
they're mouth breathing, they're using their shoulders to try to get air in,
yeah,
um, they're frozen in a stress state. They're not going to be having as much full range of motion of the respiratory diaphragm to act as an internal massage tool upon um, the lower region of the body, gut, pelvis, hip, and so on. And so those people who are more stuck in a zone three and zone two being the more sympathetic driven body,
yeah,
where yeah. So I think you're going to see that cascade of tension because it's not just physical tension, it's also mental and emotional tension, and get locked into a negative spiral of stress begetting stress. And that's going to impact that sympathetic overdrive is going to impact the muscle spindle response throughout all of your body. So you're not going to get to have as much range of motion in any joint. So if
yeah,
somebody is living in that space, you're likely not going to get as much range of motion out of their ankle, something way at a distance, because of what's known as resting tone. So the resting
Yeah.
tone of the body is in that high sympathetic drive. They're just going to have tightness or restriction that's neurologically driven, but that neurologically driven tension with the limits of joint range of motion ultimately is going to cause fascial tissues to adapt to that shorter length. And
Yeah.
you don't, you're not getting range of motion. Your body's like, I don't need that range of motion. So I'll solidify this. I'll secure this area with more collagen because I don't need to make use of that range.
Yeah.
And then when suddenly you have to run to your tube platform or your subway, or you have to dart across the street, all of a sudden you have an accident, you have an injury in your knee or your ankle, or you get a tear in your Achilles tendon because all of a sudden you're trying to get range with explosive movement where you haven't been practicing. And so then you end up getting an injury.
Yeah.
Like in the lower limb, just from over breathing in zone 3.
Yeah. So we're all wound up, like literally wound up, that tension. When someone says, if you describe the scent, like the phrase, like old school phrases that people say, like they actually make a lot of sense in some of the new science that people are talking about, like wound up, you're literally talking about some of that tension in the fascia and it being global and system wide, being driven centrally, as you say.
That's so great. Thank you for summarizing
Oh,
everything I just said. Yeah,
no.
wound up, or the other word, the other old-fashioned word is muscle bound,
Yeah.
right? Like just rigid.
Okay, yeah. And because sometimes we get people, I had literally had this with some rugby guys the other day, where it's like, oh, I'm always tight. Yeah, I'm always like you've almost just described someone that would put themselves in that category. And if breathing is influencing that stiffness, that rigidity, that then the fascial system is adapting and sort of getting more comfortable and rigid with that,
Mhm.
when someone starts to work on their breathing, what's the sort of time frame you see people making change that's like when you're talking about that system-wide tension?
Okay, so one thing to know about what I typically do is I compound breathing along with self-myofascial release or
Yeah,
position in order to affect stretch receptors throughout the body. So I'm rarely going to have people do an upright sit and just have them breathe in hopes that we can get rid of resting
yeah,
tone tension that is creating neck pain or creating back pain
yeah,
or limiting their hip range of motion. I'm often going to put them into positions that are creating, agonist antagonist
yeah,
relationships along with gravity to propagate the relaxation response. So, for example, with the rugby player team, I would probably put them on the ground and then put uh, like a Cordis ball or a yoga block underneath their pelvis or a couple of blocks underneath their pelvis so that they were in a slight inversion position, right? Where pelvis is higher than the
yeah,
heart, higher than the head. And or people can do this like there's this yoga pose called legs up the wall pose. But a lot of people they have so much stiffness they can't put their heels on the wall because
yeah,
things are so tight. So what you can do is you can throw their calves on top of a chair
yeah,
and then lift their pelvis, put that on a block. And so there's a cascade shape in the body, a slight inversion in
yeah,
body by breath. We call this the gentle slope. And then so they're in a position that's going to take advantage of the baroreceptor reflex. And then on top of that, I would do different breathing strategies that exaggerate uh, the opportunity to light up their vagus nerve. So there are, many different breathing patterns that we could talk about. And I know because that's what you do.
yeah,
We
yeah,
can talk about different breathing patterns that you could include there. But one of the cool things about this position also is it gives them a chance to do diaphragm exercise in an upside down way. So they can actually affect the zone 1 in a really unique way. When you're breathing upside down, and this is not like full handstand or
Yeah,
hip.
yeah. We're
Very
just
gentle slope.
yeah,
But your breathing is going to now lift the organs towards the sky and then allow the organs to relax.
yeah,
Rather, allow the organs to slink back towards the diaphragm. So as the diaphragm, as you inhale, the diaphragm descends, and in your body, it's always descending towards your pelvis,
yeah,
whether you're upside down or whether you're right side up, right? And so we're inhaling, and this is pressurizing the organs towards the pelvic floor. And then on
yeah,
exhale, the weight, the weight of the organs now falls
yeah,
against the diaphragm, and that additional visceral slosh helps give a little extra stretch to the diaphragm in this gentle, slow position.
yeah. At the end of the exhale. Yeah, nice.
Yes. And so there's just some different additional physical and physiological cues we can create for this scenario as a breathing own, well, this is breathing and position exercise
Yeah,
to help with just some stretch receptors throughout the core and allow the diaphragm to have a different kind of a party with the organs. But all of this partial upside downness, it also plays tricks with the baroreceptors in the side of the neck and the carotid. So one of the fastest ways to get any individual to have a vagal dominant state is to go into this partial recline. And the reason it works is you have a set amount of blood that your brain can tolerate. It's called the blood-brain barrier, and it's gated by stretch receptors in the carotid. And so when you're upside down, gravity,
yeah.
gravity has its place there. More blood is going to rush towards your head, and your brain can't handle that. And so
Right.
as the bulge starts to happen in the
Yeah,
carotid arteries, these are innervated by the vagus. There's a really quick feedback loop to the brainstem, and the brain's like, oh gosh, we can't afford to have more blood in here. Get tighter, get smaller, slow down the heart rate. We have to slow down the heart rate.
okay.
Doesn't force as much blood up into the brain. All of the vasculature shrinks a bit, so it narrows the tunnel for the blood, and your breathing pace automatically slows down
Mm.
in response to this
Yeah, nice.
cardiorespiratory rhythm.
Yeah,
And we get a free relaxation response just from the position. And then on top of that, we're doing these slow rhythmic breaths that maybe can take our athletes or our really stressed out people into interoception, feeling the
mm.
movement of these organs moving south and north in the body, and knowing that our diaphragm is the trampoline that's maneuvering these organs. So there's many different things that we can physiologically and physically cue to help induce the relaxation response, in
Yeah,
this scenario.
yeah. No, nice. It's really interesting. I guess like the positions
Oh,
that you
excuse me.
can
You
go on.
asked me how long would that take?
Oh yeah, yeah,
That's how you started the question. How
yeah.
long
Sorry.
would that take? Oh, they're gonna feel a big downshift within 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes.
Yeah,
But I would keep them there for 5 minutes, and then when you come out, you feel amazing.
yeah. And you would um I mean, I've seen this, but I'd be interested just your take. If someone was to try and touch their toes, for example, then they do that for 5 minutes. They may notice when you're releasing some of that tension, they may notice a change in their movement capacity straight away.
Yeah, so you could do, I mean, that would be really fun to do a test retest on that. So pick a joint, any joint,
Yeah,
whether it's a toe touch or a shoulder overhead or a spinal lateral flexion or rotate, whatever you want to try out, and then do that, and then recheck and just find out if that's changed the global tension
yeah,
response. I think you're going to find that there is some
yeah.
change.
Dependent on your restriction, maybe. Because I'm interested in that, like sometimes you can get like real wild change with somebody doing something like that, right? But sometimes not. And also what you were describing earlier with how if I'm getting, I've got increase in tone, I'm getting tight because of my breathing, and I'm staying tight, and then my fascia is sort of like just just stiffening up and being comfortable with those shorter ranges, some of those changes, you were talking about collagen, like if some of those changes in the fascia are going to be more permanent, won't be the right word, but more like we're starting to actually like get stuff stuck down, that if I do something to try and release like tone neurologically through breathing, like we described there, like how much effect is that going to have on my we used the term wound up, didn't we, before, like my wound up fascia that's sort of like clinging on, like will that take a little bit longer to start to remold and reform and lengthen, or am I getting some change in the actual fascia at the same time?
Yes, so don't forget that your fascia is also innervated. You have 250 million neurons that terminate in your fascial tissues. Um, so there is there are neural effects going on within the fascial tissues, but in terms of the restriction of movement, this is interesting because what you can do is you can rule out, well, maybe it's not my fascia that's inhibiting my
Mm,
movement. Maybe it really is this neural tension that from my sympathetic overdrive.
mm.
You have some give. There is some play. You're not like you're not like a ligament all over your body. Like the,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
collagen has stretch available to it, but it maybe isn't being tested in that way because of your neurological tension. But there is going to be some amount of give, some amount of elasticity, but you
yeah.
want to move at a slow pace. You're not going to test this out fast because you're going to just
You're gonna,
initiate
yeah,
that stress response again. So what, you know, I'm trying to give you a breath and position scenario, but what we do in tune-up fitness is we compound this with specific
yeah,
friction or pressure-based rolling with the different balls, because when we can compound things and actually create really a cocktail to improve mobility immediately, like within, like what I'm saying there with the breath
mm,
position, we're looking, it's probably 3 to 5 minutes to get a good measure of change. But with the rolling, we can see change within 90 seconds.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. So let's. I want to. We're going to come back to that. Um, just rounding off this little section. That's a little bit more like global breathing on the nervous system and that sort of wider tension. You mentioned vagus,
Mhm.
and you said that there's a number of different things that we could do. If you had to give the listeners just one breathing exercise that you would cue for that, what would be your go-to?
The one I just described, this
So that
gentle flow.
okay. So but would
Yeah.
there be anything with the breathing that you would do? So in the
Oh,
gentle slope, the position, but with the
yeah.
actual breathing, sorry.
Yes. So oh my gosh, there's so many. Um, I love giving different breathing patterns, and I'm trying to make it super, super simple and doable. One of the cue sets that I tend to give to a room of people I've never met before is, let's breathe in slower and longer than normal. And then when you breathe out, time out your breathing or exhale for even longer and slower than you inhaled. So take an abnormally long, slow inhale, and then take an extra abnormally long, slow exhale. Unusually exaggeratedly long on both directions, but make that exhale just a little extra.
Yeah.
So that would be like just a global tactic.
Yeah.
Um, and then I will get into the articulation of, let's shape this breath now. So let's breathe in a way that where you first feel, this is a zone one breath, the gut area expanding, and let's transition the same breath into the rib cage area. So that's a zone 1, 2. I call that abdominal thoracic breathing. I'm sure abdominal thoracic breathing is taught in every system. And then your exhale takes longer to go out than the way you breathed in. So I don't care about the order. Like you don't have to like deflate the ribs and then the gut, or the gut,
Yeah.
then the rib. Just let's do abdominal thoracic breath, creating a shapeliness to our breath. So we're breathing so that there's a filling below the rib cage, and then we're filling within and into the rib cage without translating up into the neck or jaw. Yeah, watch that you're not lifting your shoulders. Great. And then slowly allow that breath to leak out of your body, like a long, slow leak. So those would be some of the types of cues to create what I call an abdominal thoracic breath, the zone 1, 2 breath.
Yeah. And I guess a key element of that is making it very slow and making the exhale longer than the inhalation.
Yeah, and what's interesting is so my friend Tanya Bentley, who runs the HHPF Foundation, the Health and Human Performance
Okay,
Foundation,
yeah.
she did a systematic review of all breath literature. Did I talk about this in the first podcast?
No.
She did a systematic review of all breath literature that looked at breathing to reduce anxiety. So, and there were hundreds of papers, and they ended up having to, you know, poor study design, or
Find the good ones.
right? And then I think, oh my God, I'm going to get this wrong. It was either 53 or 78 papers that ultimately were included. And what they found is that as long as you're doing slow, deep breathing, and the slow, deep breathing wasn't necessarily that your exhale had to be longer than your inhale. It's just that the whole cadence of a breath had to be slower and in that, 5 to 7 breath range per minute.
Yeah.
That was for 5 minutes. That was enough for long-term effects of anxiety reduction. However, it's not just a one-off. You have to be consistent with your practice. So let's say 6 times a week, you're doing at least 5 minutes of deep breathing. This was enough to create long-term effects of anxiety reduction. Now, some of the papers had a mix of fast, slow breathing. Those also worked. But if it's only fast breathing, it did not work. It did not work to reduce anxiety. So I think that's really interesting. You have to include slow and deep breathing for this anxiety change. And I'm sure there's I don't think they were measuring physical tone. And I'd love to see that, where they're also, joint range of motion. For those of us who are obsessed with mobility, that would be really good to have that.
Yeah. It's one of but it highlights a really beautiful point about breathing that I think a lot of us fall in love with, is that it can be as simple, if someone was listening to this that's never listened to like anything about breathing before, it'd be like, what, you're telling me it's just as simple as slowing my breathing down to like something like 5 to 6 breaths per minute? Like, that's it. And it's like, well, there are more nuances and intricacies, and I'm always careful to say, like, if we oversimplify anything that's like really simple, you can, but you can lose some of the nuances. But the reality is that sometimes it's the simplest stuff, and the simple stuff's easy to do, and because it's easy to do and it has an impact, like that's why people, feel it and see change, and that's one of the things I love about it. I want to ask about because you just started going into it. Then you were describing the sort of mechanical ventilation part of like how someone would breathe deep, and you also mentioned about like, oh, don't let it jump into like the accessory breathing, the neck, etc. So I would like to ask you to paint a picture, taking into account the types of misconceptions you've seen with people over the years around what good breathing looks like or feels like and should be like, from what is the rib cage, the diaphragm, the order of it, like how is that mechanical ventilation, how is that movement of ventilation supposed to happen? And I'll throw in like one to just give you a flavor in terms of going, I've met people that are so obsessed with we shouldn't be moving like the upper rib cage that they almost like paralyze their entire rib cage, and only like they don't let their ribs move at all because they're they're seeing that as a
That's
um,
crazy.
yeah, but no, but it happened. It's
Their lungs are full of rivers of lymph, and you have so much fascial tissue within your lungs that needs to be manipulated by inflation and deflation, by the pump handle effect. Like, you have ribs for a reason, and they are jointed in the front and the back of your body. Excuse me while I like reflect
yeah,
on
yeah.
that. Like,
For a
um,
good example, like I did a like an education CPD session for some physiotherapists, and there was one person there that belly, like lying on the floor, like belly moving, yes, ribs moving, no, like, and interestingly, going to the conversation around movement. Oh, yeah, I'm really stiff. Like thoracic spine won't rotate, shoulders are all jacked up,
right.
hips are ridiculously tight. It's like the rib cage is not moving,
Oh,
but could belly breathe. Like if
okay.
Um, so it was a good little, just reminded myself of a good little example of tying in some of those things. But yeah, that was an example of like a misconception of what's supposed to happen that's actually then like restricting my own breathing because I'm like so focused on, oh, I'm not supposed to be breathing up here, and I'm stopping anything moving if that when you said don't lift the chest, yeah,
Well, yeah. So, um, any body part that has a joint is meant to move. That's for sure.
yeah,
Um, and I think that we can get lost in technique and not necessarily know what's the point of technique. I think it is really good to isolate these different parts of the body. So it's very good to be able to decipher only the activities below the rib cage. I think it's important to decipher the variety of activities of the thorax, and then it's, I think, helpful to understand what is the cervical thoracic junction. What does it mean? And then what are the movements of the skull and the neck? All of these
yeah,
related to respiration and the variety of diaphragms that are, there's some theory that you have seven diaphragms. Others say there's five. Others say there's three. I mean, there's different like theories about some of the
yes,
horizontal structures of the body. But I mean, we're an earthworm that just, you know, built limbs on top of it. So I do come across folks who are, maybe they have been trained in a certain, overtrained in a certain way, and a misunderstanding of technique, either from their teacher or their teacher's teacher.
yeah,
Maybe was promised or overpromised some effect with, only doing
yeah.
a bellows breath. Um, I'm sorry, I'm kind of chuckling because I don't come across those individuals so much anymore. But I do remember, in the past, I remember like I'll there's a quote from Mark Twain, be careful of reading too many health books. You might just die of a misprint. And I feel like that's when you come across that, you've come across somebody who, unfortunately, the teacher, the telephone game
Yeah,
has just created a very wrong um, message.
yeah. It's like a Chinese whispers sort of
Mhm.
gone wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, um,
Or there is something pathological, like maybe there is significant scar tissue in the lung and they have adhesed pleura. Like, that makes sense,
yeah,
right? And the ribs would not move. And in that case, there would need to be some very, very specific support to help mobilize the lung and the lymphatics, the thoracic duct. I mean, you'd be very susceptible to pneumonia. I mean, this can lead to some dire consequences. So,
yeah,
as a child of a mother with chronic asthma, and part of all my interest in the breath work was, being woken up at 3 a.m. with my mom being whisked away in ambulances from severe asthma attacks.
yeah,
I take the movements of these joints so seriously. And, does she have back pain, shoulder pain, and neck pain? Yeah, her ribs they are just stuck.
yeah,
And uh, I think had she had this information sooner, or had she been motivated to do some of the self-care work, there would be less symptoms at this point in her life.
Mm, yeah. Um, so paint a little picture for us of then um, what what is that
What's a good breath
ventilation?
rhythm?
Yeah, what's a good breath um, rhythm, articulation? I love what you say about like if you've got a joint, it's supposed to move. You know,
Mhm.
because I think about breathing as coming from my background as a strength and conditioning coach. I think about breathing as a movement pattern, and it's like, well, why aren't I training all of? Why wouldn't I be training this movement pattern?
Yes.
What you know, those joints are supposed to move, and maybe they get tight. And how do I mobilize them? How do I release them? Well, breathing is a great way to help mobilize the things that are supposed to move because of breathing. Except, and we'll get into a bit more detail on that with the different tools and things that you combine the breathing with. But just from a painting a picture for someone that's going right, they're sat listening now, they're going right. I think I'm okay at breathing, or I'm not that sure if I'm okay. But like, what is it supposed? If they were looking at themselves in a mirror, or if they're feeling it inside, like, what are the things that they're supposed to be seeing and feeling potentially?
Yeah. So, can I talk through, you want to talk through like what I would call an abdominal thoracic breath, which is a very balanced breath. This is the breath that I was describing earlier.
Yeah.
What are the physical, mechanical things that are happening during this abdominal thoracic breath, where when we started inhalation, there's a swelling below the rib cage. The lower rib cage also distends. And then as we try to fill our lungs to capacity, the movement of breath then switches into the ripple of the ribs as they broaden outward. And so what this feels like in a healthy, dynamically moving body is, as you begin an inhale, there is going to be an expansion of the gut, the waist, the low back, and the pelvic floor. As the diaphragm descends, it exerts intra-abdominal pressure on all these tissues. And so we get this circumferential ballooning, we get this dynamic ballooning below the rib cage. So this is the initiation of the breath. Now, the diaphragm is very interesting because it's, so in muscle anatomy, we talk often about origin and insertion of a muscle. And, the diaphragm is like the only muscle in the body whose origin and insertions switch halfway through its action. And so I have this written out on page something of my book. Page 46 of my book. So if people are,
Body by breath, people watching on YouTube or
yeah, if they're YouTubing it, I'm just like forcing this up in your face. Uh, the diaphragm switches its origin and insertion in the middle of its contraction. At first, the ribs form the origin. By the way, the origin is something that is fixed more.
yeah.
The insertion is the thing where something moves more. So at first, the ribs form the origin, and the centers of the domes are pulled down. Now, as the diaphragm descends down, there's only so far down your organs can squish down.
Yeah.
It's only so far. So then that becomes fixed. That now becomes the origin. And as you continue the inhale, the ribs end up tenting upward. They umbrella open upward. So they become the insertion. In the second half of the inhalation, the central tendon becomes the origin, and the contraction of the diaphragm lifts the ribs. And so that's what we start to see. And then we have an uplift
Yeah.
of all of the ribs. Now, as the ribs uplift, we also get sternal excursion. So the sternum also migrates anteriorly. So you end up creating this semi-barrel chest, this temporary barrel chest. It's not going to stay that way. And then as you exhale, the volume of the lungs disappears. And so the ribs no longer need to be uplifted, and they flower petal back into your body. And at the same time, the intra-abdominal pressure that had built that is relieved. And
Yeah.
so we have a no longer distension of the gut, low back, pelvic floor, and the waist, but we end up returning to form and our body returning to an unpressurized form is courtesy of the elasticity of your fascial tissues and the ability of these muscles to move along.
And so that's a beautiful picture of what, and as you were describing those things, I was like feeling it in my body as you were describing what was going on with the diaphragm and the ribs. I was like feeling it happening, which was nice. But that's nice if you, I guess, if you can pitch that and sort of understand that. And that's what's happening when someone is, as you say, breathing healthily and breathing well, and the ribs do actually move, and the diaphragm is activated nicely. What are some of the things that you see can be going wrong, or stumbling blocks, or points where people are not, this isn't working in that type of way?
I think the first reason this may not occur is many people can have breathing induced anxiety. So just being told to move your breath a certain way, your breath is one of these, as you know, this is your expertise too. It's happening automatically for us all the time, or we can override that automaticity and we can design the breath pattern. But for many people, when they are told to breathe deep or to breathe in a certain way, their central nervous system just will not allow them to control the breath. And so this is breathing induced anxiety, and
Yeah.
it's like a lost cause. You're not going to be able to catch your breath. And that's why manipulations with tools or position can really help to distract the brain in such a way that you can actually help to repattern this nervousness,
Yeah, nice.
nervousness around organizing breathing patterns. Like if we want to get to what Tanya's study found out, slow, deep breathing as a method of reducing anxiety, and yet we get anxious when we're told to breathe differently.
Yeah.
It's really a problem. So we have to figure out another workaround to have people be able to drop into their breath without the self-consciousness around it, without the threat to their awareness or threat to their nervous system.
Yeah.
So that's I really like those people. Like those are people that definitely benefit
Yeah,
by
for sure.
rolling, mindset stuff. So I think where you often so that's stage one is
Yeah.
sometimes have a breathing pattern instruction challenge.
Yeah.
And then the other side of this is that we may not have enough body awareness to be able to direct breathing into the sub rib cage and then within the rib cage. And so a lot of people will just bypass all, and
Yeah.
you'll see them use their accessory muscles. And what I just did there, if you're listening, is I hiked my shoulders up towards my ears. I kind of sucked air in through my mouth instead of my nose. And I was relying on these zone 3 muscles, accessory muscles of respiration
Yeah.
to try to quote unquote get a deep breath. This is really common in new breathers, and it's really hard to get them out of it. That's one of the reasons why we do a lot of specific ball rolling in the upper traps, the scalenes, sternocleidomastoid. We do things to pressurize the ribs to help reduce this grab at the
Yeah.
breath.
Try and sort of switch them off a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. With some of the other positional things then, and tools that you use, when you talk about positional, that like slope was a very gentle way to do something particular for the relaxation response for vagus. Sorry. I know that I've seen for sure, I use a very simple, I guess, methodology in my mind of, if I want to get, say, the posterior portion of the rib cage to move, I'm going to get you into position that restricts the anterior part. So if I want to get the back to move, I just need to make sure I restrict the front and then get you to breathe, and that backside nine times out of 10 is going to, not the backside in someone's bum, but the back of the rib cage is going to open up more. If I want the right hand side to move more, I'm going to try to get you in a position that's going to restrict the left to make that happen.
Yeah.
I very much use like body positioning. I know you use a number of tools to help you do that. For someone that maybe hasn't bought your book yet and hasn't maybe come across some of these ways that you combine breathing with position with myofascial tools, like just give us a little overview of like what that looks like, and then we can go into maybe some detail of your sort of not hardest hitting, but as in like, right, if I'm going to get, if I'm going to do, if you ask me, what's the number one thing you're going to do for someone's name a body part, like I'd say, well, without seeing them, I'm just going to throw this at you because it works for a lot of people. Yeah. But just give us a bit of an overview of what that sort of looks like or why that is so powerful for movement.
Yeah, so I use a variety of different balls called role model balls, and they're different sizes. And the one that we use, let me see if I have. I just moved into a rental house, and so I don't have all my stuff around me.
You gadgets and
I always
gizmos,
have
yeah.
my ball, but I don't have my Cordis Ball blown up. This is a Cordis Ball, so it's a. Let me just blow it up right in front of your face here.
Here after that, we got to see what your breathing is like for the blow this up.
Well, too bad I have lipstick on, so that's not gonna try. This is like here we go.
I was expecting to have like a pump or something. No, Jill Miller just uses a mouth. Epic. That's proper breathing. I bought one of these like the day after I'd got your book back in the day. But I was cheapo and just like got something off Amazon, and it potentially wasn't quite the same quality.
Okay, so you want to have, look, if you don't have look, obviously I'm an entrepreneur, buy my balls because these are made for the human body.
Yeah.
But you want to have something that is grippy, soft, and compliant. The Cordis Ball is air filled so that it is truly compressible.
Yeah.
And throughout your thorax, your pelvic floor, your neck, in a way that is so gentle yet covers a very large surface area, so we can really affect pressures into different regions. And really, what I'm really into nowadays, kids, is I like to double them up. I put two in different arrangements, and I have tons of videos on Instagram showing you this, and we have free videos on YouTube showing you this, because I really feel like every body should be able to decompress their own spine and not have to rely on painkillers or chiropractors or surgery to help you with back pain. And a lot of this pain is related to these non-gliding respiratory tissues that you and I have been talking about for the past almost hour already.
Yeah.
But a Cordis Ball. I also have other smaller balls that are solid rubber. These are called yoga tune-up balls. These are the smallest. I have two other sizes that are slightly larger than this. But you can see like they're squishy.
Yeah, they're not quite as hard. It's not like ramming a hockey ball into your rib cage.
No, and a lacrosse ball, or I guess the hockey ball, you guys call it a hockey ball?
Yeah, well, a lacrosse ball is still harder than that for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, lacrosse ball is the same hardness as a bowling ball. So these are tissue-friendly tools that do not create injury, that do not initiate a muscle bracing response that causes you to seize up and compound your resting tone into like defense mode. This is compliance mode.
But that's a mistake people make, right? I've done it in the past where you're literally trying to beat your body up with some horrifically solid tool that like you say just makes you tense up.
Yeah, and that is not therapeutic touch. Right? Like we're trying to actually mimic therapeutic touch with these tools so that we have a molding quality that we can really sort of melt around the tool and let the tool invest itself into us, because we get tremendous biofeedback from and you'll also notice this ball is not 100% filled up. We
Yeah.
tend to fill it up to about 80% so that it is super compressible, and that's adaptable. You can have even less air because when you lay down on it, it is going to displace joints. So one of the things you were describing to me, like, oh, well, if somebody can't breathe into their back, I just, I'll position them so that they're forced to breathe into their back. And that's great. So you're playing around with this intrathoracic pressure. But I want to offer to you and also to your clients that, the ribs, so that's great for stretch of the costal vertebral joints and also the vertebra also. But
Yeah.
we can do something even gentler than that for the costal vertebral joints, and that is we can do some side lying. Because even if I'm laying on the side of my ribs, I'm
Yeah.
going to be affecting the costal vertebral joints,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be affecting the sternocostal junctions as well.
Yeah.
Side lying, when you lay on the side of your body, put the Cordis Ball or a soft compressible ball, even a rolled up yoga mat is a great thing. You can even roll up a yoga mat around a pillow so there's even more squish.
Yeah.
You can lay there and breathe into the object, and you'll be able to feel the ribs
Yeah.
working their upward rotation into the object. And then on exhale, the object really snugs in, helps with the downward rotation.
Yeah.
It helps create the exhale body. So we exercise the uplift of the ribs, the upward rotation, and the downward rotation.
Yeah.
And we can do breath patterning within that. And this is also a great way to decompress the spine, the side lying position. And it's the
Yeah.
least threatening position. So I tend to find doing some frontal plane positioning is like the secret sauce to get into to improve sagittal movements, and it also improves transverse movement, like that. Like, so within 2 minutes on one side, 2 minutes on the other, and then you're like, oh my gosh, look at my
Yeah.
spinal integration now, or look at how I can create stiffness now. It's amazing.
Because you've got those ribs actually articulating around those joints at the front
You
and
just
back.
gave your ribs,
Yeah.
their own version of bicep curls, right? So you gave them the resistance, the air inside the ball,
Yeah.
plus the elastic of the ball, plus the grip of the ball. So it's working on so many different levels of your fascial tissues, and we haven't even
Yeah.
yet again we haven't even gotten on that. But it's working on so many different systems at once. Oh, and it's squeezing the lungs. So it's also helping to act as a little pneumatic pump to help the alveoli pop open and close, pop open and close, so it can get some of the lingering sputum that may be down in the
Yeah.
end zones
In the
of your
dungeons. Yeah. Yeah.
lungs.
In the dungeons of
Yeah.
your lungs, get some of that stale air out. Why did you say, I don't know if did you say it was the safest, or you said something about sideline being, maybe you didn't use the word safe, but, or maybe you did, I can't remember, but it was
We
some,
did.
yeah, but for, because you mentioned about like decompressing the spine, like reducing like back pain, spinal stiffness. Is that what you would that be your go side lying? And
Oh
just
my gosh,
interested.
it's my go-to for like 19 different things.
Okay.
But yes, it's
What was the safety element of it, or
so the safety element is um you are um okay, so if somebody is flexion sensitive or extension sensitive in terms of, their spinal mechanics,
yeah?
the side thing tends to be the least amount of threat to
Okay, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that would be a safety element. Also, when I first started teaching gut massage, abdominal massage, um, I was having people lay belly down on the ball because that's how I learned it way back when this is
yeah,
like the whisper game.
yeah.
I learned it from a yoga teacher when I was like 19 or 20. And maybe that's okay for a 19 or 20-year-old. Um, but for general population, laying belly down on this will make them hate this so much. They will be
Just
in
feel
so much
sick.
pain and feel sick. They'll feel many things. They'll feel their own visceral pain.
Yeah.
Also, when the ball goes into the abdomen, it's immediately inhibiting the downward movement of the diaphragm because the transversus abdominis and the diaphragm are encased in the same fascial layer. And so when I put this kind of direct pressure against my belly,
Yeah.
I'm stifling the diaphragm's movement. And so
Yeah.
what's that going to do to the central nervous system? Your nervous system is going to say,
I can't breathe.
alarms are going to go off. And so what I've discovered over the years is that sideline is less of a threat to the nervous system also.
Yeah.
And people, and it will acclimate them to their relaxation response in addition to highlighting the movements of breathing.
Yeah.
And doing all this other decompression bonus stuff.
Yeah.
So that's those are some of the many reasons for side-lying as the first approach with the therapy balls.
Yeah.
And so we're in movement mechanics, we're attenuating their pain pressure response by doing side-lying.
Yeah. I also like what you said about how, a lot of people struggle to get the outward. You described like bucket handles before, but that outward movement of the rib cage and having something. Ironically, I had this the other day with someone where, ironically, providing some resistance to their breathing. It wasn't lying on a ball, but providing some resistance to their breathing actually, so long as it wasn't too difficult, made their breathing actually better because they could feel. It's like they're lying on the side, like push that thing out. Okay, they can feel that. And I think then the other thing that is, and obviously like too much resistance is going to make them feel like they can't breathe, like you just described on the front. So it's getting the Goldilocks, as I said, like Goldilocks and the Three Bears is always just right. But the other one, a lot of the athletes that I work with really struggle to get their ribs down and in.
That's right.
And we probably focus too much.
They're zone 2 breathers, right? They're stuck in a zone 2 state from, right? Whatever. And so this helps to gently force exhale body into their body. And that we know that exhale, it's so important, especially for shoulder mechanics. Because if you're stuck, if your shoulders are sitting on top of elevated ribs all the time, right? This shoulders on top of elevated ribs. This is shoulders resting on an exhale rib cage, right? So we want to have that opportunity for full range of motion.
You've immediately moved your scapula on your rib cage. I think
it gets to rest upon the rib cage instead of being pushed around by the rib cage and your stress breath.
Yeah. The other thing it was making me think of was that those ribs down and in, we're typically looking at like how wide the infrasternal angle is, or we're certainly looking at like the front of the body, if I like, rather than that notion of, you said when you exhale and you're lying on the ball and it encourages those ribs to come in from that lateral sideline position, is actually getting those ribs to come down and in from the sides rather than trying to bully something down and in from the front, or they just can't get them down and in. It's just encouraging that movement, or them knowing that movement happens.
And we're addressing 2 joints at once. We're addressing sternal costal attachments, collagen attachments, or rather cartilage attachments, and we're addressing the costal vertebral joints. Right. We're getting a twofer, having that side-lying position. And then the other thing that
so just for people that are where the ribs are attaching into the sternum and where the ribs are at the front and where the ribs are attaching into the spine, like the vertebrae at the back,
a mobile horseshoe, at least those sets of ribs. Other ribs are attached via cartilage to one another. But the other thing that the side-lying does is it highlights one of the more poorly propriocepted zones of the body anyway. Everyone's like, It's literally, the ball is like a highlighter to proprioceptively, so to make one more aware of the boundaries of the side, which is pretty darn profound if you're a mover in this world. Right?
I've done stuff where you just like feel like with your own hands, like get someone to feel their ribs. I've done this in a workshop where and then like find where your first rib is, find where your lowest rib is, and and even rub the ribs on the like literally just rub them with your hands, and like just let the brain go like, oh freaking out, they're my ribs, and then they can literally talk about things being better 30 seconds later after doing something. Like that can have such a profound effect on how someone breathes, because you're lighting up that sort of sensory input of like, this is your rib cage, this is where it is on your body that you're
Yes, yes.
unaware of. It's amazing, isn't it? That is
Like
again so simple.
in this book, in Body by Breath, I have a picture and I can't find it to just keep like, let's keep beating a dead horse, shall we?
That's
There's
all
an
right.
exercise that we do in threes. And so you have one
Okay,
person
yeah,
in the middle, and then you have one person on this side pressing into this half of the
okay,
rib cage. Then you have your third partner of the
yeah,
trio
yeah.
this side. And so you have two people pushing in on you. And then you just, and this is a standing version.
And
We
you
have
just
one.
like blast them apart. That would be cool, wouldn't it? We should
You
do a
want,
video. We should
I
do like a
mean,
like a funny video that does that. We could do that. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah. They go flying.
superpower. That's kind of amazing. But on the floor, we'll do
Yeah,
it in
sorry.
partners
Yeah,
where one person will lay on the floor
yeah.
in the supine position, and then the other person will, with a broad hand, because the Cordis Ball is a broad hand pressure. So the other person will take
Sorry,
probably
what did
both.
you say then? A what hand pressure?
Oh, broad hand.
Broad. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, we're doing, if you're in the body workspace, we would use a broad palm to
Okay,
do
yeah.
swaths of tissue. So the Cordis Ball mimics the touch of a broad palm.
Right.
And when you're laying down on it, you get this feeling of wonderful, warm bear paw. But it's your own pneumatic pressure working
Yeah.
against it. Then you'd have your partner on top pressing down. So you would have a two-sided effect that way if you're not, and
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
standing. These are really great tools, and I know my gosh, I want to teach with you. You are so interesting, David. I think we would have
Well, you're coming to London, aren't you? You said in September.
yes, I'm the dates September 9th and September 19th, 20th and 21st. Let me just triple check that. Yeah. On the 19th, I'll be teaching a Body by Breath masterclass at Home Yoga UK. And then the 20th and 21st, I'll be teaching my role model method practitioner training. And that role model method training is my self-myofascial release approach. It's a competency course. And but I'll be doing some highlights from the Body by Breath book in London on that Friday. Yeah.
Right. So are they all in London?
Yes,
Yeah.
they're all in
Okay, cool.
London.
Well, I'm sure there's going to
From Rose Hill
Primrose
area.
Hill. Okay.
Yeah,
So
the
there'll be
studio is opening this summer.
we'll put some, I'll get those links. We'll put some links in the show notes for those. For sure there's going to be some people listening to this. A lot of the audience are from the UK, as you can imagine, me being from the UK. So, I will be doing my best to get down there, and I hope to see some of the listeners, down there, as well. Where else can people find stuff out, Jill? If they want to, because if they can't wait till September until you're in the UK, like how do they find out more? I mean, I've got the book. I can recommend that. I can put a link into that on Amazon, etc. Or is there somewhere? Where do you like people to buy that? Is Amazon a good place to buy the book, or I just bought it on Amazon?
Well, in the UK, you got to buy it from Amazon. I
Okay,
think I think Blackwell might. I mean, is there a company on Black? I don't know. I don't know
okay.
all the UK book
Amazon
amalgamate.
works pretty well in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah, but I know that Body by Breath and Role Model are both available through Amazon UK, and those are
Okay.
the two books. And
Yeah.
then, of course, Instagram. I'm the Jill Miller. My company is Tune Up Fitness, so we have our own feed there. And there are practitioners and teachers of my work all over the world. There are people in the UK. If you go to the website, you can type in your zip code or whatever, and it'll populate teachers who trained with me or certified competencies with me.
Ah, okay, amazing. Yeah, that'd be very good for people. I didn't realize that you had that. Yeah, they have that facility, that someone could just search on the website for.
Yes, we have a
That's
great
cool.
website. Sometimes I forget to talk about all of the dexterity of it. And then I teach online. I have an online classroom. It's called Move, Breathe, Roll. And every week there's a new class. In in some interesting niche of move, breathe, and roll. And that also is a mentor group. So once every cycle, we get together and I answer questions from our students worldwide. I present new research. I'll troubleshoot somebody's issue right then and there. It's really fun. And
Nice,
so
cool.
the way that I can stay connected to my students worldwide and also our teachers who jumped in there as well.
Cool. And what? So what's the website name? I'll put a link in for that as well.
JuneUpFitness.com. And
JuneUpFitness.com.
there's also my competency trainings are also on our website. Excuse me, are also offered through my website. So, for example, I need to mention this: May 16th through 18th, I have a Body by Breath immersion online, and I know that is fast filling. Those always sell out. We do 2 of them a year, and they are limited cohorts. I just did the role model. That was incredible. I had people from the UK, from, oh my gosh, every country. All over the world. It's great.
Yeah, cool. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time and for your amazing work and your passion and your drive for the work and your work and to continue it. Like, you've been doing this a long time, and the way that you speak about it and the way that you speak about the body with such energy it's inspiring.
With such energy. Well, thanks, David.
No, but you know what I mean? But like when you've been doing something a long time, you're answering the same questions about blood and breathing.
Oh, I know, but it's like I love figuring out how to explain to every person and to help them find their way. It's endlessly interesting to me. And I can tell that you've been at it for a really long time too. And I love difficult clients, and I love bringing people who are completely have no idea that their breath can change their life. So it's really, I have to stay interested in my subject matter, and I like to dig in, and I love meeting other professionals that I feel a kindred spirit with. So, David, it's really been amazing getting to know you in these conversations, and obviously we haven't finished it.
Well, hopefully we can have an in-person conversation in September.
That'd be awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There we have it. Massive thank you to Jill, obviously, again, for coming onto the podcast for the second time. I'm excited to meet her finally in person in September. I hope you can potentially join us there if you're in the UK or want to fly in from wherever to. But she's going to be in London on those dates that we set out. There'll be details in the show notes to get details about all of Jill's work, as well as coming to those that potential event and training with her. And don't forget, with me, got you your special Easter special present, a special Easter special present. It's not an Easter egg hunt. It's 25% off my 3 best selling programs on the probreathwork.com website, also available on the Pro Breathwork app. Easter 25, getting you 25% off those 3 best selling programs on the Pro Breathwork platform, coached by me through video tours as part of that program. So there is the Breathwork for sports performance, the breathwork for movement and mobility, and then the high intensity exercise and sports performance breath training. So check out those programs if you haven't done yet, and grab yourself that Easter special, 25% off with the code Easter25. Details are in the links for the show notes below. If this podcast was helpful, and a lot of you were like absolutely in love with Jill after the first one, I'm sure you're going to fell deeper in love now, and you think it would be beneficial for someone, I'd love you to share the podcast with someone, or at least one person that you think would find this helpful, beneficial, or at least interesting. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the podcast, wherever you listen to the podcast, whether it's on Spotify, whether you look on YouTube, please subscribe, just as it helps the podcast grow, and then we can get more amazing guests on to learn more amazing things. Thank you from me forever as listening or watching, and I look forward to sharing the next episode with you when it's ready to drop. Because I've always said, this isn't going to be like a weekly thing. This is going to be when we have top quality guests or top quality content like this one with Jill Miller to share with you. So you've been listening. I've been Jacko. Till next time, you're going to keep it nasal when you can.